Today's RIAS voice is Colin Baillie. Colin is a director in Baillie Baillie Architects, who've got offices in Plockton and Glasgow. And we're looking forward to hearing today, Colin, some of your answers to our sort of Proust questions. So thanks again.
Thanks for inviting me.
Okay, pleasure. So the first one is the kind of forming one. Why did you become an architect?
Yeah, it's actually a really good question because it's something that is nice to sort of come back to now and again, I think, and sometimes we forget, you know. But I was always really quite interested in history, which I think came from my family holidays when I was quite young. We visited, I think our holiday destinations were often sort of dictated by historical visits to castles and churches and things in rural France, which I think were really formative. And then also when I was a teenager, I remember visiting Florence for the first time when I was about 15 and was just absolutely blown away by the Piazza del Duomo and the baptistry. Coming from sort of suburban Glasgow, it was just incredible to me, the whole city kind of Renaissance Florence, which I think has still kind of left an imprint on my interest in architecture today. So partly inspired by history in the city. Also, when I was I think I had a expectation that architecture would be too technical for my interests, but I went to a degree show at Dundee, actually, where I ended up studying, and was just really inspired by how creative the course is. There was so many drawings and models, and I kind of really, I think from that point, felt like this could be something that I could enjoy, you know, that I could be passionate about.
It's lovely to hear, actually. You know, everyone has their own way into it, and I think yours is the first on history, and I get it entirely. It was one of our sort of first lectures. I remember being shown, you know, the sort of Scottish castle and the inhabited wall, and it's just so part of what we do. Thank you. And so, why do you think our work, architecture, matters?
I think there can be quite a reductive view sometimes of what architecture is, but you know, about functionality or sometimes form making. But you know, I think fundamentally architecture is about society and about culture, and it's an expression of our society. Nicholas Pevner made the distinction between buildings and architecture. I think architecture has intent, you know, it's socially minded inherently, I think, and at its best, it can be totally transformative. It's more than building. I think that's what architecture implies to me. It's about something that is, you know, meaningful and brings together these, you know, ideas around society, culture, people, how we live, you know, our past, what we want from the future. So I think it's kind of unique, totally unique in my mind to that, in that sense.
Yeah, it touches absolutely everything in everyone's lives. It's a social purpose. And so what gives you I'm already feeling it, but what gives you the most pleasure about your work?
Well, I would say, I mean, I'm passionate about architecture, and I really love so many aspects of what I do. At the moment, I think I'm really enjoying building, making things, you know, just the actual bringing things into existence through architecture, which I think as a young architect, particularly starting out in practice kind of quite early in my career as I did, it's a very slow process compared to some other kind of creative forms of working. So, you know, early in your career, you're very focused around the drawing and the process and the model making, and you know, and you know, getting those opportunities to take something all the way from an initial idea through to craft and construction, and really kind of engaging with the actual making part of architecture is what I'm finding just so exciting and so surprising every time. And I think I don't think that will wear off, actually. You know, I really think there's something just quite special in seeing something come to life, and always surprising about it, no matter how close you are to it and how close you are to the process. So I'm really enjoying building the real nuts and bolts, you know.
Yeah. it's the joyous part of it that, you know, when we're doing a window schedule, we remember that joy of being in the space or seeing the bits come together. Absolutely. So in that regard, what have you done that you're most proud of?
Well, I mean, I think thinking about that question, I really think about that more as the ethos that we have in the practice rather than a particular building or particular project that we've designed. But you know, a few years ago, a good few years ago now, we made a decision as a practice to really be clear that our ethos is to work with natural and bio-based materials and to kind of put that front and center of what we do. And I'm, you know, I'm really proud to be sort of, but you know, really sticking to that process, but that approach. But I guess also really learning from that as a process and thinking about, you know, that there's always compromises, there's always challenges, conflicting, you know, conflicting challenges through design, building, thinking about low carbon, and really just trying to be, I think, you know, good ancestors for the future to leave behind buildings that are, you know, that were really conscious of how they were made and conscious of the environment and the time that they were made in, you know. So I'm really, I think, most proud of our sort of, you know, sticking to that principle around that and really making that part of how we work.
That sounds really, really worthwhile and totally pertinent, completely. So on a lighter note, maybe what is your favourite place or your favourite town or building?
I was realizing, thinking about this, that I really am a bit of an Italophile. I have a strong appreciation for Italian cities and culture. I worked in Rome when I was on my part 1 year out, and I remember walking into the Pantheon for the first time. I love Rome as a city, just the sort of layers of history and habitation. But the Pantheon, just in its scale, structure, monumentality, light, and just its age, you know, just the sort of sheer kind of weight of the building probably makes it my favorite place and building. But maybe more kind of direct interest to what we're doing in practice. I've had the privilege to visit Jorn Utzon's own house, Can Lease, in Mallorca a few years ago, which was really inspiring, incredible piece of architecture, and I think really kind of speaks to an approach to architecture that we are interested in, which really puts materials and, you know, at the centre of how it engages with place, materials, and construction space, and that sort of you know, relationship to vernacular architecture with you know, through contemporary design. I think it's something that's really inspiring about Candice and some other projects as well.
So nice to bring back, you know, the history and the materialism, you know, to your two favourites in that one. Perfect. It's and a sort of, you know, what do you think the biggest challenges are at the moment for the profession?
I think there are many. Climate, as I've touched on already, I think is huge. I think to sort of maybe zero in that a little bit. Climate resilience, I think, will become a big kind of talking point in the near future. And what I mean by that really is how our existing building stock and how our new buildings respond to a rapidly changing climate, and that can mean many different things, from flooding, volume of water, to storm events, winds, overheating. So I think there's a real kind of discussion around climate resilience that is maybe not actually particularly well developed yet. And I also think AI is a bit of an elephant in the room for the profession as a whole at the moment, because I think that it will start having impacts on the profession a lot sooner than we're maybe prepared for. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting time for the profession. I think those things, I guess, are quite pragmatic and sort of very current. I think maybe as a slightly bigger, maybe slightly more sort of abstract point, as I think we've maybe not necessarily as a profession, but as a society, perhaps lost some of that sort of 20th century optimism for what what places can be, what buildings can be, and I think we are maybe in a bit of an age of particularly publicly funded building projects really being driven by cost and risk aversion and so on. I think there are a lot of architects that are obviously out there kind of doing the absolute best they can with those projects in that context, but I feel like as a profession we really need to keep advocating for that vision of what architecture can be.
Yeah. So these are the big things, aren't they? And it's interesting to you talking in terms of climate and resilience. There's so much about it's all about the physical and how we design in that context and build. And then at the other end of the scale, there's the virtual AI threat and its tendency to standardize and not take account of anything contextual. So you're right, we're in a very interesting period. It's going to. Indeed. So that brings us on to what would you, I suppose, I'm jumping about a wee bit, but I'm just going to ask, what do you think RIS's position in that context of your challenges? I think that's, really important.
Sure. Well, I mean, I guess speaking as as someone who runs a small practice, and I know that a lot of RIS's members will be small practitioners. That sort of shifting and changing context as to what it means to be an architect, to be in practice, sort of brings with it lots of uncertainty. It brings with it lots of, even things that we're seeing currently, increasing costs for small practices, more that we actually have to do, targets that we have to meet, and so on. It's a complex and potentially can feel somewhat overwhelming, particularly without the sort of connective tissue that is the RIS and these sort of more central organisations that help us as a profession to sort of understand what's changing, help to sort of digest that and and disseminate that into the profession. I think is one really important role. More broadly, I think engaging with the public, engaging with other industries, engaging with government at policy level. I think these are really kind of fundamental things that I think RIS is doing and and needs to be doing.
Yeah, I think we need to do more. I mean, our view is, our collective voice is the big thing. So it's that connective tissue of all of us, but connecting to all the issues and being the voice of the profession. I think that's what we're really keen to do. And we're about to launch a new way of working as well to get more involved. So it's very positive. And anything that you feel we specifically should be doing more of?
I guess I'm conscious that we are also part of a global profession, and I think it's really important to ensure that we're very much outward looking. And a lot of the challenges that are facing the profession are certainly not unique to us in Scotland or even in the UK. And I think I'm kind of really interested in getting a better understanding of what the profession is doing in other countries. There are other countries in Europe, maybe think about Scandinavia and so on, that have a culture that perhaps really values design and architecture. And I think it'd be interesting, maybe through whatever means, through collaboration, through delegations, perhaps exhibitions, to really try and engage with be part of a wider conversation. I think is also really important, not to sort of lose sight in among all the issues that we face.
Yeah, it's pretty pertinent too. Absolutely. Finally, the lighter question: what would you tell your younger self if you were starting off again?
Take a break. I think take some time off. I actually think that architecture school, has maybe always had a sort of culture of quite, you know, like quite an intense culture around the work and the course. But certainly with me, I think it's sort of I carried that forward into work and into practice. Partly, I think partly that's a really good thing, you know, about work ethic and being passionate about what you do, but also maybe just realizing that there are other interesting things out there as well, and actually to, you know, really, you know, it's just important to take some time off and take a break, and also just let that kind of enrich your work and your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is the thing that's so very hard to juggle as things stand at this moment. Well, thank you very much. It's been great talking to you, and hopefully you get a chance to get that balance and get a bit of a break with a short break. Okay, thank you. That's great.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks a lot.